Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. On this week's podcast, going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter, bit of a snappier episode coming out of a busy week. And what I want to chat about today is sales lessons or lessons on connecting with people from a wine sommelier who worked for 10 years in the trade. So I no longer work as a wine sommelier. I worked for roughly 10 years as a wine sommelier, about 15 years in the hospitality business, working for a range of restaurants, cafes, nightclubs, bars, events. There's probably some other stuff in there, and for the majority of it, I did specialize in fine dining. I worked at several hatted restaurants here in Melbourne, Australia. And I also worked overseas as well in the Netherlands as a wine sommelier. Now, over that period, I was extremely dedicated to my craft. I consistently worked 50, 60-hour weeks over that period. I learnt so much about people, about wine, about hospitality, and it's a topic that I really want to dedicate quite a few episodes to, because I think hospitality is just the most beautiful expression of what the social element of what humans are. That connecting over a meal, over drinks, in a fun and celebratory fashion. I mean, this is, for me as an anthropologist, it stands out as something that we have always done. It is the same type of celebration we did when we were hunter-gatherers, and there was food brought back from the berries or the different, say, like plants, and then like the main kill that was brought back, and then different parts of the animal, and the tribe celebration or that communal celebration. I think that we still do that to this day. And I do want to dedicate a lot more time to that. I want to talk with other hospitality professionals about that. But for today's episode, just because the topic of selling or even understanding someone, and when I mean selling, not in the used car salesman type, but in the genuine sort of partnership model that you might have with a guest in a restaurant. And this isn't just for aspiring wine sommeliers or people in the restaurant industry. I think this sales model or method, or these learnings that I want to share, directly relate to any industry. I'm currently doing some sales specific training in my corporate job that I do, and the model of it is identical. Well, all we're really doing is just changing the inputs in there. So with that said, and excuse me, I'm going to sip on a little bit of coffee throughout this, as it has been a long week. But yeah, with that being said, what are the key lessons that I've learned as a wine sommelier for over 10 years in the hospitality trade when it comes to selling? The most important, I'll refrain from saying the most important just yet, but what are the 3 or 4 priorities or tactics or things that I do when I engage in a sale? So the first, I'll refrain from saying like first order or hierarchy just yet, but one of the key parts to selling for me is thinking about, I'm selling to the person. I'm not trying to sell the wine. I met so many wine sommeliers over the year, obviously, because a lot of wine sommeliers really rate themselves, or they get into the industry because they themselves, they love wine. That makes sense. But they get so obsessed about the wine, they forget that there's a person in front of them, and they're not the ones actually drinking the wine. And I consistently met wine sommeliers over the year who played the wine and not the person in front of them. So they would end up telling this elaborate story about this like wine, why it's so spectacular, why it's interesting, why it's going to challenge them, why it's this, that, or the other. and they would serve this wine and the guests would absolutely hate it. One, because it's probably a wine not for the average drinker. It's probably for soms and their wanker mates. The second thing is they were so focused on talking about the wine, the product, they never actually spent the time to learn the guest in front of them, the buyer, and what it is they actually want. So for me, my perspective was always the person in front of me. In the latter part of my career as a wine sommelier, I actually became sober, and for about 4 years, the last remaining 4 years of my career as a wine sommelier, I didn't drink alcohol. I still tasted wine, and I just spat all the wine that I was tasting for guests, but I was never actually consuming it. I'd sort of fallen out of a love or the romanticism of wine, but it actually made me a better wine sommelier because it was no longer about the wine. The wine ended up just becoming a tool or the avenue in which I could then deliver these really beautiful experiences to people. So I think it is absolutely critical, the attitude and the mindset that you go into a sale or an engagement with a guest, a client, is that it's entirely outward focused. The product doesn't even really matter. That comes so secondary to the relationship that you're building with this person. And I think that is so critical because the buyer, the guest, they don't actually care about the product. What they care about is the feeling they get from that product, or the value that they get from the end result. And so in the case of being a wine sommelier, it doesn't matter how premium the wine is. It doesn't matter what vintage it is. It doesn't matter what varietal it is. It doesn't matter who made the wine. It doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't matter what structure the wine has. It doesn't matter, what I think I said before, where it's come from. The number one question you should be asking yourself in the perspective of the guest: is the wine yummy? That is the most important question you are looking to answer on the behalf of the guest. Nothing else matters. It does not matter, because it doesn't matter where this wine has come from, the story behind it, how prestige it is, how rare it is, what funky winemaking has gone into it. There is no better way to ruin someone's trust in you and ruin someone's night, their evening, their meal, than to deliver a wine that they do not think is yummy, that they do not think is delicious, something that when they drink, they're like, God, that is so tasty. I just can't wait to have more of that. I can't wait to have another glass of that. So in that sense, it has no bearing any of these other elements too. Those other elements, they are the tools, I believe, that you can use to create excitement around a wine, to create rapport and to create the trust with a guest. But if you fail on that last part of it, everything else doesn't matter. There is no significance to these other elements for it. And why that's critical to have that question in mind is because is it yummy should be how you're trying to understand the guest. Is it yummy? So how I would then go into a sale, the first question I always like asking, and it comes under this question of a what question, but I'm trying to just calibrate my palate to their palate. I'm trying to get an understanding of what it is they know, what it is their taste profile is like, and what it is they enjoy, and also what is the occasion about as well. And so the first question I always like to ask is, what wine do you usually drink at home? And sorry, maybe I've even skipped ahead there, is the first question I always go into a sale with is, I understand you're looking for some wine this evening. what wine are you looking for this evening? Or sometimes I'm even presumptuous enough to say like, oh, can I start you off with a champagne? And then I initially just get that read from them that says, oh, no, I'm not after like champagne, or yes, I am. And well, if you're not after champagne, what else are you looking for? You're looking for a cocktail, you're looking for this, like whatever it is. And so I'm getting that initial read from them. And more often than not, most people, when they're looking at a wine list that's got anywhere from 500 to 4,500 wines on it, they're quite overwhelmed by the experience and they want to be guided through that process. And so they say like, oh, what wine can you recommend? And another perspective, and I've just realized I'm jumping around quite a lot here, but before we get back into that very first initial question I like to ask, the other perspective on, is the wine yummy? The other question that I believe is critical to have in your mind, or the context you have in your mind, is that when people are dining out especially, but really in like any sales process, I think, or especially a service process, they don't want to think. They just want to relax. They don't want to think about anything. They don't want to make choices. They just want it to be easy. And so the level of ease you can bring into a transaction, relationship, that will make people feel so much more calm and trusted in your presence. Those are two of the key principles you should be going into a relationship or sales with. And so with that in mind, you don't want to be grilling a person when you're asking them questions to get like your read. You don't want to be challenging them. You want to be asking questions that make it as simple as possible for them to give you an answer. And you're dumbing down your knowledge to match their knowledge. There is no point, and I love when I see sommeliers do that, and I say love in a sarcastic way, when they just overwhelm a guest with their own knowledge, and it just completely alienates the guest. They feel uncomfortable about the whole process. They don't trust you. They also don't want the wine that you're recommending to them. They're not impressed by this at all. You just look like a wanker. And people do this in all kinds of sales. There are ways in which you can talk about a wine, you can show off your knowledge, which comes off as quite endearing, but alienating a guest by making them feel insecure about their own knowledge or understanding of a topic is the last thing you want to do. So maybe I should just go through this process first, because I think I've been beating around the bush a bit. But the first question I always ask is, what wine do you usually drink at home? And it's not that I'm going to end up selling the same wine they drink at home. What's the point of that? I'm trying to get a read of their palate. And so what they'll usually say is, I usually drink white wine, or I usually drink red wine. Now, this, I think a lot of sommeliers react to this and they go, oh, well, that's no help. Red, white, that could be a million different things. Well, with that attitude, yeah, you're not going to get very far in this, but you've now just cut off half the wine world in that respect. That's what the perspective should be. So if they come back and they say, oh, I drink red wine, fantastic. What type of red wines do you usually drink? And sometimes they're like, oh, I'm not too sure. I drink a lot of them. And I said, oh, that's awesome. That means we've got a lot of different wines that we could recommend for you then. Do you find that you usually drink the larger, heavier wines like your Shiraz, your Cabernet, or is it some of the lighter styles, a little bit like your Pinot Noirs? Now, I use those international varietals because everyone tends to know them. There's no point in me saying, oh, do you usually drink Negromaro, or do you usually drink Zinfandel, or do you usually drink Nerello Mascalese? No one's going to have any idea what that is. You want to make that transaction as easy as possible. So it's quite often, if someone's buying wine, they're engaging on you in that conversation. they're going to know what Pinot Noir, Shiraz is, Cabernet, if they're a red wine drinker. And it's more often than not, they say, oh yeah, I love Shiraz, or oh, I'm much more a Pinot Noir drinker. And I say, oh, that's fantastic, awesome. So let's say we've got our Pinot Noir drinker. This is where I think another little mistake people can make, because if we get those responses of, like, I'm a Shiraz drinker, or I'm a Pinot Noir drinker, and or they're saying, oh, I'm not too sure. Right off the bat, I'm getting the sense that this is probably a less educated wine drinker. More often than not, a more educated wine drinker will come to you with very specific questions. They will say, oh, what can you recommend in terms of your Barolos? What can you recommend in terms of your like Barossa Valley Shiraz? They'll be very specific, and then you can have more specific conversation. But I want to start with maybe the less educated diner or guest, or buyer of any field, because I think they're generally the majority of the people you end up selling to. So when I'll continue to play this through, I get back my, I'm a European wine drinker. That's fantastic. With the Pinot Noirs that you usually drink, do you find that they are really sort of fresh? They have this kind of kirsch, raspberry-like character to them, this sort of strawberry jam character, or do they come off a little bit earthier in style? Are they got sort of like that vanilla baking spice character to them, or do they have that sort of forest floor kind of green stalkier flavor to them? And why I've chosen to frame it around the taste profile is because that's going to be the end result for the guest. I'm not going to ask them, do you prefer a cool climate, a warm climate? Do you prefer like Central Otago? Do you prefer Mornington Peninsula? Because that, again, I think runs the risk of alienating a guest, because they might not be familiar with those areas. But the point of being the sommelier is you are familiar with those areas. Your knowledge makes you familiar with those areas and how those wines taste. And the taste is the final value, the outcome for the guest. So that is how we should always be speaking to a guest, through the outcomes, not the how of it. So more often than not, it maybe that's even a bit too specific. You're just getting that read on them, and I say, well, do you find it's the sort of like the bigger, juicier styles of it, the really smooth styles of Pinot Noir, or is it the more sort of crisper, crunchier styles of Pinot Noir that you drink? And generally, they'll have some sense of that. Or they'll say, I want something that's just really smooth and light and easy to drink. And that's when I can start to piece together, okay, this person's probably not looking for a Mornington Peninsula or a Geelong Pinot Noir, which is going to be pretty rich and heavy. I'm getting the sense from them that they're probably looking more for a Yarra Valley style of Pinot Noir, or a Central Otago, which I know is going to be a little bit lighter and fresher. So once I get that read, I've now got a sense or something specific, and I might even ask, do you find that with those Pinot Noirs you usually drink, they're from the Yarra Valley? And they'll go, absolutely, they really love those ones. Or they might correct me and say, actually, no, like it's the Mornington Peninsula ones. And that kind of contradicts what they've said. But now I'm getting more of a read on what they mean by what they say. So from there, I've now got this basic read on what they drink, what they like. And this is now where I start to offer some solutions, we might say. So, forgive me, before I do that, I'll also ask, what's the occasion for today? How many of you are drinking? Because this might determine how I layer this sale with other sales. And I'll also ask what food are they eating, because ultimately the food someone is eating is also going to have quite a significant impact on the wine they're drinking. However, in the Australian context, and I'm sure it's the case around the rest of the world, but much, much less so in Europe, it's just how the relationship with wine has evolved over time, and as it's got more modernized, the relationship with wine has become more separated with food. I've found, or maybe people have become too dogmatic with the wines they drink and will drink them regardless of the food they have in front of them. And what I mean by that is you will find a middle-aged Australian woman who is very happy to drink Heathcote or Barossa, Valley or Coonawarra, Shiraz Cabernet, whatnot, with her fish and chips. Now, for most Europeans, they will immediately understand how disgusting that is and how awful that pairing is and how you're ruining both of these things together. If that's not apparent to you why that is awful, I'd highly recommend subscribing so I can talk more about wine and food pairing, or do your own research on that. So, as I said, I will get an understanding of the food someone is eating so that then I can also make some recommendations around or start to piece together what wine I'd like to recommend, and recommend knowing how that food is going to impact their palate. Not to necessarily tell them that, because it may be the case that I'm having to push them towards a lighter style, an earthier style, a more tannic style, a less tannic style, a heavier style of wine, because I know that once they start consuming that food, it will impact how that wine tastes. So once I have that rough read of this person's palate, and so I've come to understand maybe some other wines they also drink as well. I know I've kept it quite linear here, but once I've got that calibration, that's when I will go back with my solutions at this point. So I always like to offer 3 different wines, potentially 4. Potentially more. It depends, I suppose, on how busy I am. In all seriousness, how adventurous I think this person is as well. But what I always like to offer someone isn't a low, medium, and high price. I think that's not very exciting as a wine sommelier to do. I also don't think it in the long run builds that much trust as well. What I recommend is a safe option, so the option that will deliver exactly what that person has described to me as wanting, and I'll say to them, this is what I recommend to you as the safe option. It's going to deliver exactly what you want. It's a delicious wine in all respects, but at the end of the day, you've just told me what you usually drink at home. This wine's going to be very similar to that extent, and look, we're not at home here. So I just want you to know that this wine's going to be exactly what you enjoy, but why not take advantage of this 4,500 bottle wine list and try something you've never tried before. And this is where I will then recommend a wine that is, say, the same varietal, but it's potentially a bit more premium or has more uniqueness to it. And I am getting a slight price change in this as well. And I'm talking to why this will go above delivering what they usually drink, why they would find this more spectacular, why they'd find it more memorable than just that regular choice or that safe option there. But it is still within the realm of safeness. It just has more, say, complexity to it, more of a story to it. It's the uniqueness is where that more premium price tag comes from, and it isn't something that you could just get at the bottle shop. The third option I always love offering is something completely new, and we'll take the example of say a Pinot Noir drinker. This is where I would love offering, say, a Nerello Mescalese, or potentially even a Nebbiolo of some kind, or what other fantastic like light red varietals do I really enjoy? It's been a hot minute since I was a sommelier, so I'm trying to scour my brain quite quickly. Maybe it's a Corvina blend of some kind, potentially, let's see, a Grenache of some kind, or a Gamay of some kind. And I'm offering this to them as it's hit that first calibration I've discussed, that broader level of lighter red wines. But then I'm seeing how I can match that up with the next rung down in terms of, is it the earthier styles of wine, those more fruity and fresh styles you like, and offering them something they've never had before. It's quite uncommon that your average Pinot Noir drinker in Australia has had a Nerello Mescalese before, a Southern Italian lighter red wine grown on Mount Etna, which has these really rich, earthy, volcanic mineral characters like to it, or potentially a chilled Nebbiolo that's a little bit like fresher and it's really like tobacco and tomato leafy, or potentially a Grenache of some kind that's made more like high altitude and just has that sort of lighter freshness to it. And this is where I want to try to create more excitement around it. And I'm now giving 3 different options that all equally provide a lot of value, but still deliver on, is it yummy? What I believe is the best option of all 3 of these for a guest to purchase is the third option, even if it's not the most expensive option, even if it's the cheapest option. Firstly, why you don't want the first option, the safe option, is them purchasing them doesn't build really that much trust in you. They'll turn around and they'll say, oh, yeah, this is delicious. It's exactly how you described it. Fantastic. No one's going to write home about it. They're not going to tell anyone about it. They're not going to take a photo of the bottle. It's going to feel safe to them. And you're going to meet so many guests or buyers that will always purchase this option, and they'll be very grateful for it. And you know what, they'll come back to you and they'll ask you again, and they'll to serve you, and they'll end up probably buying the exact same wine, and they'll do that for the next 3 years. The more premium option, if you end up going down that path, I think you build way more trust than that first option for sure. And they're going to have this amazing experience. They're really going to, you've kind of elevated, you've enlightened them, and you build a lot more trust. They've now got more, a greater sense of what it means to have a spectacular or more premium wine. You get a greater sense of the specificity of the wine, the terroir of the wine. But you haven't necessarily challenged them. You haven't made them, I think, rethink or recalibrate their own understanding of wine. You haven't made them curious enough yet. And I think this is why when you go down that third option, why this breeds the greatest amount of loyalty and trust in you is because you're exposing them to the realm of the unknown, the realm of chaos, and they're now not in a fight or flight, but they've now entered into a space in which they've got no choice now to trust you completely. There is a level of surrender in this, and you better deliver on it, because if someone is in this vulnerable state and you don't deliver it and you burn them with something that tastes like shit or it just misses the mark, and you've just sold them something you thought was cool or interesting, they are more vulnerable to then getting burned, and it will just be harsher, and they will not trust you again. They won't even like you. You better bloody be a good or rather, you better have bloody asked some really good questions when you started that engagement with them, when you started that sale process, that you have a strong read on what it is they like, what they want, so that then when you do deliver that more obscure wine, it hits the mark. Now, you're not going to get it right every time, and there are ways to build back from that quite easily as well. But it is, the most high risk, high reward process, but I think it is so well worth it. And it's the process I would always, the pathway I would always go down. And I think it makes it so much more exciting for you as a wine sommelier as well. that is going to expose you to more unique wines, and you're not just selling 100 bottles of Giant Steps Pinot Noir every evening. You're getting to travel the world, and you're getting to travel the world with your guests as well. And those are the bottles that they take photos of, that they ask you how they can find something like this. They talk about when they're next going to Europe or wherever it is, they're going to try drink some of this as well. And they're going to ask, what other foods can I eat this with? What other producers are there? What other styles of this type of like wine there is? That level of excitement, that builds a more long-term relationship. And for those that aren't familiar with sales or marketing, you make so much more off of your loyal guests or your loyal customers than new customers. So you want to be thinking more in that long-term relationship mindset when it comes to selling, when it comes to being a wine sommelier, because even though you might not see this person again ever, or for another couple of months or 6 months, whatever it is, they will remember you when you come back. One of the best compliments that I consistently got from the guests that I regularly dined was they hated the wine somms that just over inundated them, were trying to show off their knowledge, or just sell the wines that they wanted sold. Whereas what I consistently delivered to them was things that were yummy, and they'd say, "You just get me. You understand what I like." So that should be the aim there. Now I want to go back over this actual calibration and sales process a little bit more, and the questions that you ask and the things you're looking for when you're speaking to a guest, because I've gone quite fast over this process. But as I said at the start, that really fundamental question of what wines do you usually drink at home, I think that question can carry across to any industry. Let's take cars for example. What car do you usually drive? What cars have you driven in the past? What wines have you driven in the past? What tennis racket do you usually use? What tennis rackets have you used in the past? In, let's say, professional services, what consulting or marketing services have you employed in the past? What research have you employed in the past? What research most recently have you found has really worked for you? And the inverse of it is phenomenal as well. The inverse questions, I think, can even provide better or more useful answers. What wines have you drank lately that you absolutely hated? Have you driven a car recently that you absolutely hated? What research or marketing services have been provided to you that were useless, have not provided anything actionable for you, or just were not a pleasure to work with? That opening up question is really, really valuable, and you want to know what they're talking about. People don't give complex answers to it. You need your, say, this industry knowledge or your specialist knowledge to be able to answer those questions. And it's not that you need to know it in detail, but if you have some sense of what a Fiat drives like, what a Mercedes drives like, what this tennis racket like feels like, what the weight on that is like, what the difference between a market segmentation or a brand tracker, or what this consultancy is like, what this other wine is like, that is going to give you so much power in terms of being able to read them and understand what it is that their experience has been. And I'll just bring this back to wine, that your palate is so unique to you, but it really holds memories. Your olfactory system is the only sense, your sense of not your olfactory system as a whole, but your sense of smell, which makes up 90% of what you actually taste, is the only sense you have which bypasses the prefrontal like cortex, which is the logical reasoning part of the brain, and then goes straight to the emotional part of the brain, the deeper part of your brain, which holds and stores memories. And so it's quite an emotional and a non-rational experience someone has with wine. And then they have emotional reactions to it as well. So having an understanding of why someone hated or didn't like a wine, that's going to be really powerful. Inverse of why they really liked a wine as well. So that is very critical, and that question can be asked to the advanced or the really knowledgeable guest as well, the one that doesn't even really want your help that much. And it's particularly the case that when, say, someone does say they don't want your help, they just want something really specific, when they do order that with you, it's always great to ask, oh, have you drank this vintage? And more often than not, oh, the vintage, oh, I didn't even look, or why do you, so I drink this wine all the time. And it's like, oh, just because, say, this vintage, it was a little bit more challenging. It might not be used to the previous years you've had before, which were particularly warm vintages. And so, they're really big, rich and buttery, which I'm sure is probably why you enjoy them. But this one, however, because it was a lot cooler, the winemaker's gone down a different path and hasn't really put as much oak into this, and is really showing off those cooler, fresher, more acidic characters like in the wine. And I was like, oh, actually, no, I don't want that at all. And it's like, oh, can I help you, say, recommend something else? And because you've just engaged that initial opening, that calibration, you're starting to get that little bit more trust in it as well. And you're getting a sense of what they like or they don't like as well. So I then open back to, other than, say, this wine that you've just chosen, what other wines do you enjoy, or have you been drinking lately you've really enjoyed? And they'll give you some really specific answers. I love Adam Foster's Syrah wine, or I've been drinking a lot of Benjamin Leroux, or I've been having a lot of Macon Chardonnay, I've been having a lot of Chablis, and this, and this. And you just want to keep asking and finding out more questions. Is there anything else? Is there anything else about why you enjoyed this wine in particular? Or, I start to just label about the wines that they're talking about, why I think they like that. And I want them to correct me. I want them to say, yeah, that is exactly right. Or no, it's because of this part of it or this part. And I'm just building out that calibration for them of the different types of wines that they enjoy, so that then I can go back in with my recommendation to them. So I do want to keep this as a little bit of a tighter episode, but I think when it comes to that sales process, if I was to break it down, there's that initial opening, who are they? Who am I? That introduction of how are you going with the wine list? I know it's a bit of a Bible with 4,500 wines in there. Rather than wasting your time, can I offer you some assistance so that we can get something in your glass as soon as possible? And again, I'm thinking in my mind, what is the outcome this person wants? Well, they don't want to be reading a sodding wine book for half their night. They want wine in their glass. And that sort of opens up that initial conversation. And then what I'm looking to do in that is build a consensus, or build that initial rapport. I do not offer solutions at this point. What I'm looking to, is get that calibration, that sort of shared experience, those shared pain points and successes with the wine, to show that I'm on their side. I'm not looking to rip them off or just sell them something. I'm genuinely looking for a type of partnership in this. And so once I've built out that with them, that's when I start to then offer some solutions and open up that more specific dialogue with them in there. And when you do that as a salesman, as a wine sommelier, I think it becomes a lot more enjoyable for you as well. And you get yourself out of this weird little rat race and competition you end up having with the guests. And I see so many wine sommeliers doing as well. And overall, I think it makes you such a better wine sommelier, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about the wine. What you're there is creating an experience for these guests, and that experience is the one they have when they come into those front doors, when they get taken to their seat, they're greeted by you, and they're along this entire journey. But I think I might just leave it there for now. There are so many more tactics when it comes to sales in general, or with wine, being a wine sommelier, especially when it's the case that you're spending not just 30 minutes with a guest, but you're really spending anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours with a guest or a set of guests. And it's not just the one bottle you're selling them. It's not just the one glass of wine. You're selling them this entire journey, the multiple like bottles of wine, the different glasses that come there. And that's where I think being a wine sommelier becomes so fun, because you're matching different wines across their meal, and you're trying to then satisfy different people on the table as well. When you've got conflicting guests as well, like what do you do? What do you do when someone says, I'm a Shiraz drinker, I'm a Chardonnay drinker, this and that? And there are solutions to all of this, and they come from, they're never the things that you're going to get taught in court of master sommeliers or WESET. These are things that come from the experience within the industry and making the mistakes more than anything. So it's such a fun industry. It's taught me so much when it comes to building relationships, building rapport and sales. But I'll leave that to the next episode. Thank you all very much for joining on this short and snappy episode. But yeah, enjoy your week. Cheers.